Welcome everyone to another monthly experts on employee experience. Super excited to be featuring Jerome Collins today from Microsoft. He was a former president of BAM North Carolina, which is Black at Microsoft, and currently co-leads BAM's Minority Student Day worldwide. Before we dive into it, real quick, why we gather here today and why we host these webinar series is to really share learnings across workplace and employee experience. So I'm Jade, I'm one of the co-founders of Epoch. We work with incredible companies globally to help drive workplace culture. So again, we're here to really just share learnings and feature incredible people that are doing the hard work of culture and understanding how to bring employees together in a meaningful way, like Jerome here today. But with that said, we're going to get started. Today, what you can expect from Jerome and our conversation is Jerome's thoughts on employee engagement, diversity, inclusion, and culture, the ins and outs of leading in an ERG, and much, much more. And to kick things off, everyone, in the chat, feel free to maybe express yourself, how you're feeling today as an emoji, just to warm up the chat, so that along the way, if you all have questions, just ask away, and then we'll address them at the end. But with that said, to kick things off, again, super excited to welcome Jerome today. And with that, I'll quickly lob it over to Jerome to introduce himself.
Yes. So first, Jade, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you and all of the folks who are attending. My name is Jerome Collins. As Jade mentioned, I've been with Microsoft for close to 7 years now in various capacities. Joined Microsoft as technical account manager. I've spent a number of years in business planning and commercial licensing, which is a marketing function, just sort of focusing on licensing and pricing strategy in the North America region. And most recently joined the sales organization as a senior commercial executive, where I focus on leading and negotiating our deals and closing them compliantly and on time. But in addition to my day job, I am what you would call a culture ambassador. I'm incredibly passionate about ERGs and the work that organizations should do to foster healthy and thriving communities. And so that's a little bit about me. I am a native of Chicago, but I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my wife and my beautiful son, Journey, who's 7 months old.
And also, Jerome, you are a singer, songwriter,
Yes.
painter, artist.
Yes, I am, I would say, a multidiscipline artist. Singing, songwriting have been in my repertoire for the better part of 20 years. I started painting when I was 8. And so painting, abstract painting is a very big part of who I am. I also love photography. That's sort of, I would say, a pandemic hobby that I picked up and have really dove into digital art as a way of creative expression as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Jerome. So we'll dive into it. And again, everyone tuning in today's webinar, if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A section, and Jerome and I will address it at the end if we have time. But with that said, it's going to be a really great conversation, so we'll just dive right into it. With that, Jerome, I know employee engagement and culture, based on our previous conversations, is really important to you. But I guess for the audience here today, like, why is it important to you?
That's a great question. One of the top reasons for me why it's important is because it's a part of my lived experience. And it's really a part of all of our lived experiences. We spend a significant amount of time at work, regardless of whether we are in the office or working from home in a hybrid culture. And being, I would say, a net positive contributor to community and culture is one of the ways that organizations thrive, right? It's not just about the policies that an organization has in place, but it's about the people that are on the front lines fueling the desire for folks to do more and to engage. And one of the ways that you can do that is having a healthy and thriving community where folks can really bring who they are to work and make a significant contribution through their talents and strengths and experiences.
Yeah. And I guess like with that, Jerome, like how did you find out about ERGs? And for those who don't know what ERGs are, employee resource groups, how did you find your community within Microsoft?
Great question. So, before Microsoft, I'd worked for a number of smaller organizations where, ERGs weren't really a thing. And frankly, it was go to work, do your job, and the happiness that you attain from that is what you take home. But coming to Microsoft was really a completely different experience for me, where there was encouragement to find your voice within the community, and sort of systemic programming to help you do that. At orientation, you hear about employee resource groups, and then you get a list of a list of distribution groups that you can join. And then you meet people over time, and they tell you about different events, happening. And so for me, I found out about ERGs probably within the first couple of weeks of coming to Microsoft.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Even 7 years, because yeah, you've been at Microsoft for seven
yeah,
years. So even
yeah.
7 years ago, they've already had communities, ERGs.
Oh yeah. So just a
Incredible.
bit of information, Black Said Microsoft is the longest running ERG at Microsoft. It's been around over 30 years, and
Wow.
originally started in Seattle, and has sort of grown to regional and a national and global level, really, where we've got folks who have started the ERG in chapters across Latin America, and very recently Europe and even Africa. So it's growing very organically. There's a lot of positive energy in the community.
That's incredible. And I know we talked a little bit about like why ERG is important, but I guess like how did you get involved and how did you get into that leadership position that you did and like run through that 10-year period the past 2 years?
Great question. So, I first got engaged by, I would say all those years ago when I first started Microsoft, it was just, I'm a people person. Put me in a room with 20 people and I'm going to know at least half of them by the end of the night. And so, I lean very heavily on that extrovert part of who I am to meet new people and understand. But one of the things that I love about BAM is that it's a very purpose-driven organization, and so there's not a lack of opportunity to serve or to get engaged. And so when I first started, one of the very first events that we had was an event called Winter Blast with the YWCA. It's a collaboration with their Youth Learning Center, and it's since become one of my go-to organizations for service, because I love the programming that they have around, trying to raise the literacy rates with minority students and students who come from, backgrounds that we would consider diverse or have less opportunity. YWCAs are very different than YMCAs, where the YWCAs mostly operate in low-income neighborhoods. And so there's a great opportunity to go and to serve. Yes, you can give gifts, but giving the gift of time and, speaking encouraging words to folks is sort of was my initial inspiration for getting involved with that Winter Blast programming. And then from there, we have, monthly town hall meetings where we talk about, what's happening, what's on the docket. There's a call for volunteers. And so, I started to find my voice in my area of interest within BAM. And that led to me eventually running for, vice chair or vice president and president of the organization. When you initially run, if you're selected, it's a 2-year term. So you're elected as vice chair for 1 year, and then you serve that second year and sort of work towards transitioning to the next person, who's going to lead the organization.
Yeah, that is definitely something we'll talk about as well in terms of the structure of the ERG and like why there is that 10-year, like 2-year leadership position so that everyone else gets an opportunity. But I guess before we dive into that, like what is a typical structure of Microsoft ERG, such so that people understand as we're talking through, like how it looks like, regional, global,
Yeah,
size.
ERG to ERG, it, it looks different, but I'll tell you this. Um, as a BAM organization, we're sort of set up regionally and nationally. And so, for instance, I had the opportunity to be the president of the BAM North Carolina chapter. And in North Carolina, we've got Charlotte and Raleigh offices and employees sort of scattered throughout the state. And so we organize in a way where, Charlotte is our regional HQ, but we have very strong leadership representation out of Raleigh, and the opportunity to collaborate on events. I would say, the ERG structures are pretty mature within an organization like Microsoft, but mostly because of how large Microsoft is, right? And so there's opportunities to join BAM, Blacks Microsoft, or Women in Microsoft, or OLA, or Gleam, or families at Microsoft, or the military ERG. We even have affinity groups. I'm a part of an organization called the Conscious Creativity Community. It's a very organic growth organization. We've got close to 1,000 attendees, and it's grown very naturally over I would say, the past year and a half or so, where folks have found out about us and, find us in the Teams community and have joined and got engaged. The CCC is just a place where creatives gather, where we can bring our talents and perform them, but also find initiatives that we might be able to serve on. So, Microsoft is the kind of place where systemically, from a culture and an ERG perspective, it's set up where grassroots movements can happen, and they do happen, as evidenced with the CCC.
That's incredible. So there's ERGs and then like affinity groups, to your
Yeah,
point, like CCC.
yeah.
That's awesome. And I guess like with that, Jerome, then do you have any advice for people that are starting ERGs or affinity groups?
Yeah, the biggest advice that I have is, really start with your why. And having a North Star for your organization is important because you want to organize around a couple of key pillars, right? How do we fight for the most equity for the people who are in our group, whatever that looks like? Externally, how do we take this energy and passion that we have and affect people in a net positive way? And then three, how do we advance the company that we work for? Because at the end of the day, like that's what's golden, right? We all come to work and with the expectation that we're going to perform our tasks to further the organization. And so mapping that into the structure of the ERG, excuse me, and how the ERG is able to contribute to the all of organization is important. And then I think the other piece is you've really got to have executive engagement and sponsorship, for an ERG to be successful, because those are folks who are going to advocate for the leaders in the ERG to spend additional time outside of their core roles. That's where the funding is going to come from. That's where the long-term vision is going to come from, as well as opportunities for those executives to sponsor leaders. I think when you look at ERG leadership, the folks who tend to apply to lead or lead into leading the organization are very natural leaders, regardless of if their role says leader in it. And so being able to cultivate that talent and find it in a community, I think leads to better employee retention rates as well. And so, the ERG strategy is a part of, I would say, a strategic imperative for organizations. Like it's super important, regardless of the size of the organization.
Yeah. Was there anything that you've done during your leadership tenure as the president of BAM that you found very effective, or kind of the highlight of your tenure as the leadership for that ERG?
Yeah, you and I were talking a little bit about this, and I'm super proud to talk about it. Last year, BAM, North Carolina, we won the Chapter of the Year award, and it's a very contentious award because there's, close to 20 chapters of BAM globally, as well as affiliates. And so each chapter takes a lot of pride in what they do. And I think that, last year, some of the hallmarks of success for us were collaboration, deep collaboration with other chapters, being able to, leverage the budget that we have in each of the areas, but also the planning expertise. Being able to, leverage my own talents for Minority Student Day last year in North Carolina. I was very privileged to, be able to design the T-shirts and some of the swag that we gave the students, and it was no small feat, but I, using my own talents, I was able to actually give in a very significant way. I think the other thing is just really listening to the needs of the community and incorporating that feedback into our programming, right? During the pandemic, we were locked up in the house. And so, we found ways to corral each other through lunch conversation. So we had a standing lunch session where we'd come and
Oh, like
have a
virtually.
specific topic, or we play a game called Family Feud, which is like Family
Oh,
Feud.
sweet.
We'd have movie nights virtually. We'd have happy hours. We'd have, charades, all kinds of things to sort of keep us engaged as employees in the ERG virtually. And we had to figure that out quickly. But whenever we did have the opportunity to meet in person, we took advantage of that, whether it was, meeting outside in a way that was safe and in compliant with, the current rules that we had in place for, ERG experiences, but really making it our own, and being intentional about it. So and then when it came to the flagship events like Minority Student Day, we had fantastic leaders who went the distance to get us additional budget and executive sponsorship that we needed to really outdo ourselves. Last year we were at the Carolina Panthers Stadium. We had hundreds of students come out from dozens of schools. The impact, the programming on top of what we were doing nationally was impressive. We had then the BAM Worldwide president, who was from North Carolina, so he was regionally with us. And then a number of dynamic speakers who just came in and really invested in the kids in a very impactful way. And so, doing all of those things, being intentional, seeking the budget, but leaning into our talents and leveraging the power of other chapters coming together, I think was sort of the hallmarks of the reason why we were voted Chapter of the Year.
Yeah. I know you mentioned from our previous conversation that like consistency also served you all very well in
Yeah.
terms of like events and programs. So like how did you all think about that? Was it like one event per month minimum, or like a large event per quarter? Or were there goals like that in place?
Yeah, you know what? So the way we're sort of structured, there's different committees. So
Mm. Oh,
highly,
within BAM, like there's
yeah.
different committees.
So
Oh, cool. So
or
organized, of
yeah, as
course.
organizations, especially large organizations can do this probably a little more effectively than smaller organizations, but there's, internal connections, external connections, there's professional development, there's a social committee. And so
Oh, wow.
between these four committees, we might have leveraging your talents to further your career session on one Thursday, and then we might have Bamley night the following Tuesday, or we might have impactful Black History programming during the month of February. Last year, for instance, we had the executive producers from High on the Hog, which is a Netflix special. They came in and talked about their experience. Two women, fantastic ladies, Karis Jagger and um, Oh gosh, if she's seeing this, she's gonna kill me. Karen Jagger and Fabienne Toback. They came in and talked about their experience executive producing that film and what it meant to sort of unlock the mysteries of African American cuisine and sort of trace it back to our roots, coming to America and going back to Africa. At the end of the month, we had some programming where we did a cross ERG collaboration between Microsoft and Google, Amazon, and Cisco.
Oh,
And we went
cool.
to see a basketball game together, right? And we had like a mixer an hour prior to the basketball game for introductions. And then we went and watched the game. So you're finding those really good opportunities to sort of sprinkle in professional development, fun and impactful work. I think it are sort of the keys to having a sustainable ERG within the culture of your organization.
Yeah, that's incredibly compelling, and I understand why you all won ERG of the year. That is, yeah, very intentional programming and really just about gathering people in a way that's meaningful, especially connecting with
Yes.
external companies. It is a thing
Yes.
that we've been hearing on the rise, like collaborating, sharing learnings with other ERGs externally.
Yeah, I do see that as it, and I think we'll probably talk about that. I do see that
Yeah.
as a, um, a trend that we'll continue to see rise because one, we can learn from each other.
Hmm.
Two, we can multiply many times over the power and effect of our budgets and our planning and our vision, right? When we're able to come together as with the power of the different organizations, it makes carrying the load a lot lighter. And as you can see, we can do very impactful programming in a way where we're not trying to recruit each other's employees. Like let's just go out and do impactful work and have make great memories together.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Like volunteering together within like a
Yeah.
region with other company ERGs, totally impactful.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the other, I would say, the most impactful collaborations that we've seen with external organizations, and I got to shout out the folks in the New York chapter of Blacks at Microsoft. They started a collaboration with Globe, which is the Black Employee ERG at the Nasdaq, and so every
Mm,
year we've been able to ring the opening or the closing bell during Black History Month. And that's been a very momentous experience for a lot of folks, being down there in the heart of the financial capital of the world, really, and to be able to do something as momentous as, be a part of the ringing in ceremony. Where you see what happens behind the scenes, where you get a glass of champagne and you take a picture, and it's just an incredible experience, a very memorable experience.
yeah, that is awesome. And maybe shifting gears a bit too. I know we talked about there's like succession planning because
Yeah.
previously you were the president of BAM Microsoft. Those only last over a tenure of 2 years and then it shifts. So yeah, could you share a little bit about succession planning, why that is important, why it's important to also give others the opportunity to lead an ERG?
Yeah, succession planning is incredibly important because, it's biblical that the what is it that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And I
Mm,
love that quote because it represents what the world of volunteer work is like. When you're volunteering for an ERG or a nonprofit or any kind of organization where you're not being paid, it it takes a person of certain character to get engaged, and a lot of times that measuring character is leadership, right? Compassion and empathy. And so when you have people that sort of come to the table with that leadership, compassion, and empathy at a very high level, and on top of that they're talented, you can achieve great things. And so being able to think about the health and life of an organization by succession planning very intentionally. Some people are called to do things very naturally, or some people are driven to do things very naturally, and then other people are called. And so, having understanding who's who, like I'm I'm very naturally driven to do it, but I know a couple of leaders on BAM and C that were called, and it doesn't make them any less of leaders, but they might have needed that nudging to say, hey, you can do this, or I believe in you. Come and be a part of what we're building. And that's been very tangible, right? So as a part of succession planning, having an idea around who has the capacity to lead the organization at large, who has the capacity to lead a committee at large, but who has the capacity to lead an event, right? Just one event. Can you just lead this one effort, whether it's a holiday give event or a social, right? Knowing how to tap into the talents of knowing the talents of your people and actively seeking it out. Two, knowing when to leverage those talents. And then three, being able to inspire folks to come off the bench and give, I think are all very key parts of that succession planning. And you have to be very intentional in that effort and sort of hand down that legacy from administration to administration. Here at Microsoft, or with the ERG, for instance, it's a 2-year commitment as a leader, from vice chair to chair or vice president to president. But there are other roles that are appointed, like the professional development, internal, external connections, social chairs, et cetera, et cetera. Black History Month chair, Juneteenth, et cetera, et cetera. So you find ways to have different levels of commitments that folks can make, and then make it easy for them to get to those commitments that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that in terms of breaking it down such that you're meeting employees where they are in their capacity to give back to these ERGs. Because to your point, the ERG role within Microsoft and most companies, it's volunteering. You have your full-time job on top of it still. So for you, Jerome, like how do you balance it? I think on the other side, like a lot of like DEI leaders that are trying to encourage ERGs within their companies often are left wondering, like, how do we ensure that people are able to balance both their like full-time role and like this really crucial ERG leadership position?
And it's very critical to find balance, because you should be performing at a high level in your core role in order to be considered for leadership within an ERG. And that's pretty much the standard for organizations, right? But when you think about employee retention, sometimes we have to think about that differently. Is there a way that we can get our employee to lean into this community effort in a way that we can inspire them to be greater in their core role, right? The two are not always mutually exclusive. And you have to find that balance, but I think the rules should be clear around who can engage and how when it comes to ERGs. For me personally, I balance the time by, thinking about what commitment I can make up front. Having intentional conversations with my directors, my skip level directors and folks within my organization about what I'm passionate about and what I want to do, so that it's not something that's just out the blue. Like, well, where'd you get that from? Like, you didn't, you never talked about that. Now you want to do that. But another key piece of the puzzle, I think, for organizations is that DE&I efforts should be systemically included as a part of your compensation philosophy. And that's very controversial, but it's something that we have here as a part of our compensation philosophy at Microsoft, right? Like, you're measured on what you're doing from a D&I perspective. And so, when you make that a part of the conversation for compensation, it's a different kind of conversation, right? Because the expectation is that it's written into your core requirements for this job to find some way to give back to other people, some way to invest in the community that is this organization that we call Microsoft. And so, I'm incentivized to go in and live out my talents through engaging in the community. And I believe that if more organizations did that, and they thought very artfully around their compensation philosophy and how it relates to DE&I, it becomes more than a buzzword. It becomes more than let's check this box so that we can make sure that we're able to market that DE&I is important to us, and it sort of gets to the place where I would say we're walking the talk. We're talking about what we're going to do, but we're going to model that in a way that's measurable and impactful in employees' lives.
Yeah. And like, yeah, a little bit about that. I know we're hitting time soon, everyone. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. But yeah, just like a few more questions for you, like last two questions. Like, how do you think about measuring success for your programs, for your internal events within ERGs, or like affinity groups even?
That's a great question. There are so many ways that you can measure success when it comes to ERGs. It could be in the percentage of participation by population. It could be in the impact in utilized budget year over year. It could be the impact that you're making in the community and how that is measured in anonymous feedback. It could be impact in the level of executive engagement, and I believe like you should level the impact in levels, right? Like how many executives have we gotten engaged with D&I programs?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
How many individual contributors and directors are engaged in the ERG? What's the amount of time that they're putting in, and then what's the impact that the organization is making all up? I can quantify that as BAM North Carolina year over year by the work that we're doing, by the feedback that we get from our external and internal partners, by the level of engagement from the constituents within our chapter, and the level of enthusiasm when it comes to the programming that we put out.
That's incredible. And with that, Jerome, I know we're hitting time soon. So one more question for you.
Sure.
What are some exciting trends that you foresee in employee engagement, experience, or DE&I?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to get a chance to go to Culture Summit, which is where you and I met.
Yeah.
And I loved, some of the programming, like what was happening with late night art, right? And the idea of, bringing a bunch of folks together and doing a transformational program where we're able to spend time getting to know each other, while we're able to brainstorm creatively, community brainstorm each other's problems for answers, and then actually spend time connecting with people on a human level. I think that organizations, especially as we try to figure out what is hybrid work going to look like, do we go back in the office full time? One of the ways that organizations are going to be able to drive that employee engagement is through the communities, through the ERGs, and through the affinity groups. So I do definitely see that as a growing trend where organizations are asking, what can we be doing better? I think the cross ERG collaboration there's amazing opportunity in that. One, for mentorship, for professional development, for philanthropic purposes, for opportunities to drive even greater impact externally. And then another thing that I see is sort of a rise in ERG and culture consultants, where organizations are asking out for outside perspective on what can we do better. How do we put these systems in place, so that we can really drive measurable impact regardless of the organization size. And then, of course, with tech, I do see a rise in, applications and systems for organizations to measure the success of their organization, measure the level of employee engagement and the happiness index, and, everything related to communities within the larger community of their organization.
That's awesome, Jerome. And with that, to wrap up, then, do you have any parting words for the audience today?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be important for organizations to lean into this notion that culture is authentic culture is um, it's important to employee happiness. It's going to be critical to employee retention, and I think even critical to finding the next group of leaders to matriculate through the organization. Because in volunteer opportunities, this is really where you find natural born leaders, folks who are just very naturally good leaders of people and initiatives. Being able to tap into these communities by having a vibrant culture, I think is going to be one of the catalysts for organizations, finding new products and ways to service their customers. And so, I would employ, everyone out there to really think about what you can do to contribute to, I would say, the roots. How can you contribute to the roots of your organization in a way that the grass and the grassroots efforts can grow in a very healthy and measurable, sustainable way?
That's an awesome note to land on, Jerome. With that, everyone, thank you for gathering here today. Thank you, Jerome, again for your time. I'm going to quickly play us out. But with that, thank you for everyone's time today. If you all have any questions for Jerome, where can people find you and contact you?
Yes. You can send an email to Jerome D. Collins at me.com. We'll also put that in the chat. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Jerome Collins. You can find my music on Spotify and YouTube and really streaming services as well. Jerome Tracy Collins. I'm super excited to have conversations with folks regarding culture and ERGs and how you might be able to grow your organization through creative thinking.
Thank you so much, Jerome. We'll definitely send over your contact information around. And with that, thank you everyone for coming together today for another installment of our monthly Experts on Employee Experience. We're Epoch. If you ever want to chat more about anything Jerome talked about today or anything workplace experience, feel free to reach out. And if you have anyone that you would recommend or you would like to be featured on our monthly installments, let us know.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Jerome, thank you again. This was a great conversation.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Jade.
All good. Everyone, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.